Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I'm the streamer for this stream, and we work on a Django project that is a software as a service. That's what SaaS stands for if you're new to that concept. But it's essentially a web application, and I walk you through everything I'm doing for this project that I'm working on. It's an app that I'm building for my family for some homeschool stuff that we're doing here that eventually I want to extend and make available to others. But first I got to make one customer happy, and that customer is my wife. But tonight we're going to work on something that's not directly related to her needs. I last week worked on a weekly view that is associated with the app to show a full week's schedule of everything that's needed, but I didn't quite finish up the logic, and I told you all on the stream that the rest of it would be kind of boring, and I just was busy this past week, so I didn't have time to get to it. So I'm not going to subject you to that, so we're going to do something else that will ultimately be needed, but I'm going to ask a question of the day that let's consider. So question of the day for you all is, how do you like to work with CSS? What tools or frameworks do you use? Just to get your juices going, because that's going to be part of what we're doing today. Is my focus is to start styling some of the pages that are outside of the core app that I've been working on so far, and some things that will be needed eventually. If I start working with other people, I want to have a decent onboarding flow, I guess, is where I'm going for, and that's going to be the focus. So in my flow today, my wife will already have the data needed for the current school year. I'm pulling out of one application. Hey, J4Spot, welcome. So we've already got data to work with, and I've shown that off when I've worked on the app. And let's bring it up as a reminder so that you can see what I'm doing and what I'm dealing with. And this data that I have is pulled. Oh, no problem. Thank you for calling out the flaw in my website. I appreciate that. So this data that I have in my app, oh boy, I need to remember my login. I'm apparently logged out. Test at testing? I think that's it. Dang it, not it. Oh boy. It's going to be hard to show the app if I don't have the login. All right, well, we'll get to that in a second. So I've got all this data to work with in this application. This data is actually coming from another service that she's using, and I wrote a bunch of scripts that do some web scraping and pull all the data that actually applies to my son and my daughter, so that she can jump straight ahead. And that's great for her, and it works for this school year because the hope is that she can switch over this school year, but it's not going to work for the next school year because she won't continue to use that other application, and it's not going to work for any new user. So what I need to do is start working through how is any user, I guess, going to get in the necessary information that is needed to make the school year work. And so we'll talk a little bit about the data models that go into that creation process, and we'll have to have different creation forms to get that all together and make sure that everything hangs together so that somebody can get started quickly. That's the goal. And we're going to do some styling along the way. So I asked that question of the day about CSS frameworks, and the reason I did that is because I'm going to start today with styling the sign-up page, sign-in page. And it's going to look similar. I think it's going to be almost identical to this thing, frankly, with a little bit more forms. So we're going to get to do some kind of copy and pasting. I don't want to go crazy with this initial style. There's not going to be pricing information or anything else that you might put in a software as a service. I don't need any of that for this first cut. I just want to be able to have someone sign up for the app if they so choose. So if you have CSS frameworks that you've used, let me know in the chat. Like, let's get some discussion going. We're going to be using Tailwind CSS here today. That's what this project is using, but I'm interested to hear what you use. Hey, Osada, you use Bootstrap and SaaS CSS. Great. And we'll talk about why you do that. So curious, what is it about Bootstrap that you like? Is it just familiarity or something else? And while you're thinking about that, I will go look up my temporary login that I have on this local database so that we can actually log in again. I can't believe I forgot the user account. So the first thing I'm going to do is run the shell, manage shell. And I'm going to import from homeschool.users, that's where my custom user model is, .models import user. And there should be 1 or 2 users in here, I don't remember. Oops, not object, what am I doing? What am I doing? That's a terrible query, Matt. All, that's what I'm trying to do. So there's my user account. And let's get that user. So let's say, I'll just put it to you and say get and username equal Matt. And then say u.email, see what I forgot. testing@somewhere.com. Mainly familiarity. Yeah. So Bootstrap is a really cool framework. I've used it a lot in the past, and I agree with you. It's nice when you just need some components to put something together quickly. I tried to use on my last project Semantic Ui. I don't know if y'all have heard of that. Let me write it in there. And Semantic Ui tries to be kind of like Bootstrap, and it looks nice, but in the end, it just wasn't a good fit for my project. And that's not a knock on it. I'm sure it's a great tool, but it just ultimately didn't click together. So Bootstrap is really nice from having some components. I don't know. Is Semantic UI dead? That's a good question. Let's check it out. Sometimes those projects reach a stability point. Like I was actually on a podcast just the other day, and it's a side project that I have that I don't work on much, and it's basically stable. So you know, I am sympathetic, I guess, to people who have projects that they use where they feel like, hey, this thing is kind of done. I'm not saying that's the case with Semantic UI, but maybe it is. Never know. Anyway, this is Semantic UI. It's got a bunch of components that feel bootstrappy, I'll say, and that you can use, and you know, it has a certain styling to it. So this is what I used in my last project. But what I found with not only Semantic UI but also Bootstrap is you have to remember to use a certain kind of structure. And latest commit was some months ago. Okay, yeah, so maybe they're taking a break. So the downside I found to these sort of things is you have to remember the structure that goes along with these components. And if you can remember it, great. But my memory, maybe as I'm aging, I don't know, is getting not so good for those sort of things. And so what I've liked about Tailwind, which is the current thing the thing that we're going to use tonight, if we actually get that far, is that the things I have to remember, 2018, maybe not so good. The things that you have to remember for Tailwind look a lot like the CSS properties themselves. So if you learn or ever learned CSS in the past, Fomantic. I wonder what happened to the developer. I'd be interested to go research that history. Anyway, getting back to Tailwind, like what's cool about it, in my point of view, is that a lot of the attributes that you use are very much like CSS. So Agus Bob, your question is, can you pass data while two programs are running? Can you expand on that, Agus Bob? I don't actually know the kind of context you're talking about. You can have multiple. Yeah, you're new to that's totally cool. So just help me out, flesh out your problem a little bit, because you can have two Python programs. And are you saying, can you pass data between the Python programs? Or just expand on that if you don't mind, and I'll be happy to try and answer. So Semantic UI just has a nice feel for me. Seems like CSS, and then it's got a bunch of stuff that I feel like makes responsive web design pretty easy, which is why I've taken a liking to it. So let's try and get back into my app now that I know the actual login. So it's testing at somewhere.com, and I've got a junk password that I use for these kind of projects. So hopefully, here we go. Okay, logged in. So here's the view that I have of my site, and as you can see, it's got a bunch of data already, and I don't know that we'll get all the way towards starting to flesh out some of the forms that are needed to set this stuff up. But we can start talking through what some of those pieces are. And I'm going to honestly just walk through this with you, because I don't actually have a clear picture in mind of what's going to be the fastest way to get a brand new user up and running with the school system. Because there's a lot of data that's actually in the model to put together. And in fact, let's go look at the Django admin so you can see the models that exist. So there are courses, there are schools, school years, grade levels, enrollment, students. Yeah, all sorts of stuff is going to be involved that we're going to have to set up and make forms that kind of guide the user on a path. And I kind of hate this term, but something like a wizard that might say, here's your first step of onboarding, and here's your second step, and just hold their hand to give them everything that they need to get their school year set up, get their A course created, get their student added and enrolled. I am using Django all ChoiceBot, which is I really like it. It's pretty nice. So that's what we're going to need to do is all that stuff. But tonight, what we're going to focus on, at least initially, and then we'll see how far we get after that, is the signup flow. And so if you look at the app, actually let's go back to the logged out view. And it's kind of hard to see because the debug toolbar is in the way, but if I just click this stuff to get rid of the yellow bar, once that clears out, all you can see over here, covered slightly by the debug toolbar, is login. And the reason that all you see is login is because I put sign up behind a feature flag. So what I want to do is carefully control who can actually even create an account on the app. Not that I think that this is going to get a bunch of heavy traffic, but I just don't want to have a bunch of spam accounts or any other kind of stuff getting in there when I'm not ready for that yet. So I used a system called feature flags, and the particular package is called Django Waffle, and it lets you control what is on and off based on a database table of flags. Let's go back and log in, and we're going to have to log back in because I logged out to show you that. But log in here, and you can see that I already have this particular flag in the database table. So this is turned off right now. But what we can do is we can check this box and turn it on. And so what changed is that everyone column went from being a Boolean of off to a Boolean of on. And so now let's look at a new private window and come to the app. Let me position it so you all can see that well enough. And go back to port 5000. And what should happen once this thing all loads up is now there's a sign up button, and that was in my template guarded by this feature flag. So unless I have the feature flag on, you can't see this functionality. So it's nice in what it will let me do when it comes time for me to introduce other users to the app, because my long-term plan is to go out to various homeschool communities online after I have something like core put together and record a quick video. Yeah, it's not showing an inspect element. Let's look at the template to make it super clear. But the long-term plan is to go out to these communities and say, hey, is anybody interested in using this app? Let me know, contact me. And then I will kind of directly work with that individual and tell them, hey, I'm turning on signup so you can sign in. Let me know when you create your account, and then I can turn it back off. And that way I can kind of control who comes in and comes out. But to do that, in the templates area, and I believe I put it in the navigation. Yeah. So what you can see, where is it? Flag. Here it is. So the first thing you do with Waffle is you import the template tags from Waffle tags, and it gives you access to this new flag tag that behaves like an if statement, if you will. And if the signup flag is present, or it's on, I should say, then it will show this markup. If it's off, it won't even render, like at all. So that's like, to answer your question, J4Spot, it's like you can't even inspect it and see something by chance. It's controlled on the server side, so it's not even possible. I'm going to go back to Agus Bob's comments, see if I understand the question. So you have a username and message. Are you talking about a Django app, Agus Bob? That's what it seems like you're talking to. And just want to make sure that's clear. Yeah, it is nice. The Waffle stuff is definitely a nice tool to control, and it's a good way to. Feature flags are an awesome way to continuously roll out new code to a website. So let's say you're working with a team of maybe a small team, maybe a large team. It doesn't really matter. If you consistently use feature flags in your project, you can work on things that are not even totally finished. Jace, I'm sorry, Jace. It looks like J-Force to me, but that's just because the 4, I want to read the 4 as it is. I don't know. Gotcha. All right, I'll try and remember that, Jace. So if you're working with a team of people, or even a small group, large group, doesn't matter, and you have an unfinished feature, sometimes you don't want to like set that all off in a branch, a long running branch, because it means that your changes can start to conflict with other people's changes. So by using feature flags, it will allow a team of people, or even just a single person, I mean, I'm one person and I'm still using flags myself, to control what is visible to the users. And it has a nice effect of it. What it does is it decouples deployment from releasing. And that's kind of specific sounding, but I'll describe it. So whenever I deploy, I'm using Heroku, and I do git push Heroku master. That's the way to deploy. But maybe I don't have the confidence that my feature is 100% working right? So if I work without feature flags and I do a deployment, I git push to Heroku master, and Heroku puts the new application out online. In the world without feature flags, if there's some catastrophic bug in my new feature, the only way to get back to a working state for your site is to do a bunch of like rollback stuff and take changes to like undo everything and do that. And you can do that, but you can imagine that is it's riskier, right? Now contrast it with a feature flag version. So if you have a feature flag and you do the same exact deployment, but you default to having your feature flags off, what happens now is that your code is now safely living on the production website, the final website that's available to all users. And then from the CC admin, or excuse me, that's work stuff. From the admin, you can toggle flags on and off. And so you might try and toggle it on. And if something does go catastrophically bad, then you can just turn it off. And like, you didn't have to do a new deployment or a new code change, and you immediately get the benefit of hiding that and reducing the amount of risk. So it's pretty cool in that way. Yeah, I can see how you're talking about with the Google stuff. Yeah, that's totally true. So this is something that gets used by organizations, huge organizations for certain, but it can also be used for small teams. So if you're trying to get into Django, thinking about ways to do this, I would highly recommend getting feature flags and getting comfortable with feature flags in your process pretty early, because it's useful. Okay, so we still haven't even gotten to the thing I'm trying to show you tonight. And the thing I'm trying to show you is, watch what happens when we actually click this button. It's going to look like rubbish. Or it should. Because I at least I set the base template. But here's all of this information about sign up of, I need an email, I need a password. But this form has no meat to it yet. This is the generated HTML that is coming straight out of Django All-Auth. And while you could use Django All-Auth's default template stuff, I really just want to take advantage of the form fields that I know I need. And in this case, the email and password. Yeah, yes, HTML without CSS is not so great. And even this looks okay. Like, it's not like, the gnarly button. I think this is supposed to be a button and all that stuff. But what we're going to do is we're going to try and copy that login page and make the sign up page look similar. I'm going to use this login as the sort of comparison thing. What we're going for is, well, I mean, frankly, almost identical to this. We're going to change this text to sign up and this text to sign up and drop a forgot password. But otherwise, I think they might be the same. So maybe this won't be as hard as I thought. But this is one step, one example of a step that we have to take that my wife is not going to have to take, because I'm going to create an account for her. Maybe add a confirm password. Yeah, maybe. I think I'm kind of on the fence about the confirm password stuff, because what I've seen is if you were to do a sign up page and you put in an email address that's valid and you did flub the password for whatever reason, I think that the way All-Auth is kind of designed is to say, like, you don't need to do a password confirmation, because if you did mess it up, you can say forgot password and go be directed to the forgot password workflow, which will go through your email confirmation. So I'm not a huge fan of the confirm password stuff, because yeah, I'm just not crazy about it. Maybe longer term there might be like a lot of sign up forms that I've seen have an option to say show password. Maybe I'll do that. But I think for now, again, in the spirit, well, not again, you all haven't necessarily been here long enough. 10-minute mails though. Oh, interesting. Yeah, so one of the things that I'm trying to do with this project is be super minimum viable product. Is my last project went way overboard in the things I tried to do, and I gold-plated stuff, and yeah, it tanked because of that, frankly. So I'm gonna stick with sign up with just email and password for now, and then I think what we'll do is we'll carry on from that point. And as I think what I may do is wait for feedback. When I actually get to the point where I'm inviting real users in, I'm going to pull their feedback about the onboarding experience and then kind of polish it from there. That's my strategy. So let's start with the sign up page, and we have the login page somewhere, no doubt. Here it is. This is the login page, and we're going to have the sign up page is probably sitting right next to it. It is. And you can see I've just dumped in the very bare minimum right now to include a H2 tag, the form itself. And I'm using Django's built-in form as P, which takes all of the form elements and automatically generates the minimal markup. So let's take a look at it, because that's useful to see. We can see exactly what my template did and what Django did for us. What did I just do? No. Come on now. No, I don't want to view the source selection. Let's go whole page. There we go. So this stuff up at the top comes from my base template. This comes from my base template. All of the stuff below it comes from my base template. All of this stuff right here is actually injected by the Django debug toolbar. And you know, why don't we could turn that off, because it's just gonna be noise for now. Let's kill that by opening up. What am I gonna open? Ooh, do I have any secrets in the env file? I don't know. I'm gonna put it all in secret mode for just a second, folks, but I promise we'll be right back. And I think I have a couple passwords in there that I need to make sure you all don't see, because I don't want to go resetting a bunch of passwords. But I'm going to turn the debug toolbar off, so I have an environment variable to control that. And okay, back to good state. So we're going to turn the dev server back on and go back to the site. And now if we refresh this page source thing, it should be much, much shorter. And I just refreshed all my chat, so I lost chat history. Whoops. I'll get better at this, I promise. So yeah, now you can see dramatically shorter chunk of source code that we're looking at here. And the entirety of this sign up page is contained in these few lines right here. And we can compare to the actual template that we were looking at. So we have this block main, and that corresponds to the base template. So has this surrounding main tag, and all of our template stuff goes inside of here. Okay. So this is the stuff we need to replace, and we can replace it with a lot of the same stuff we see in login. I also need to point out or get that we have to get certain field names. So interestingly, the name for the password field that Django Auth expects is password1. Chase, as you mentioned about the confirm password stuff, I'm guessing that's because Django Auth probably gives you some settings. So if you want to do password confirmation, there's probably a password1 and password2. I don't know for certain, but that's my guess. And if y'all are just joining in, I don't know, I'm seeing some people come in. Sort of the question of the day that I've been asking is, what do you use for CSS frameworks? We've had some people use Bootstrap. If you use other things, let me know. We're just kind of chatting about what we're going to do with some styling and looking at some template stuff tonight. So that's what's going on. And if you want to keep up, I guess I didn't even mention, if you want to keep up with me, there's my website is listed up above at mattlehman.com. And I am on Twitter as MBLehman, and GitHub and all the places as MBLehman, as well as Patreon. So if you decide that this is worth a few bucks for you and want to support me that way, that would be awesome, because that will go help pay for hosting costs for the podcast that I run and all that other stuff that I try and do. If you aren't able to do that, that's cool too. I totally get it. So I just thought I'd share that before continuing on. So we're going to take this form and we're going to take in the login form and replace fields. I think that's what I'm going to do. Oh, you saw Django Auth being used in cookie cutter Django, Chase? Is that what you're referring to? So let's take the whole form and okay. And let's drop it into. Now I've got to put it in this inside. See, here's the area where I also have the sign up flag. And I did this for a very good reason. You can, on this page right here, this sign up link is here. And it only appears when I have the flag on, but that's not stopping the actual page from being accessible. Okay. So if I have the feature flag off, people could still get to the sign up page, and it's possible to disable the whole view, but I didn't want to mess with that. So what I opted to do was just put the main content also inside of a feature flag, so that if someone does happen to figure out the link and go to that page, it'll just be empty unless it's off. Oh, is my Patreon link not on Twitch? I can do that too. I should. Let's see. All right, so we need to paste in this login version, and we'll indent this one level. And what that should do now is give us all of the login flow, and then there's going to be a little bit of extra cruft at the bottom for the moment until we delete it. But I'm leaving it around now so that I can make sure that I check the inputs and stuff. So let's refresh. And we're going to go up here and change. And I think actually we don't even need this login template anymore. So if you're new to Tailwind, there's a bunch of stuff in here. And the way Tailwind works is it operates by saying you have to provide a bunch of CSS classes. I guess they're not a CSS class necessarily. That's just a class attribute of an HTML tag, which then gets used by CSS, but it doesn't have to. But the way that Tailwind decides to go with things is saying, here, let's provide a bunch of little pieces, a bunch of little classes that you can add, and you can compose them together to make larger things. So if we're reading this form, we're saying that this has a background of white. It has a medium-sized shadow. It has rounded corners. There is padding in the X to 8, and there's a whole scale that's associated with this. That means a certain sort of relative points. There's also padding on the top of 6 and padding on the bottom of 8, and then there's margin. And we're adding a border, and the border color is a certain blue. So you can learn a certain number of these classes, and then you can start to read this stuff. And what I like about this over other frameworks is that I don't have to keep a separate CSS file around. Like I could have said, I could have changed all of this stuff and said login form or sign up form or something like that. Just like this. And then had a CSS class that would have all of those attributes that I just described using the CSS markup that goes with that. And that would work. And, that works for a lot of people. But what I find is cool about this is I don't have to write custom CSS. I think, Osada, you said you use SaaS and SCSS. And I used to do that too. And, if it works for you, more power to you. But what I found is that this kind of flow means that my design kind of moves into the HTML instead. And, I guess the jury's still out if this works for a huge site. Like at this stage, I'm sort of copying some styles around patterns that are there. And I will eventually, if I have a lot of these things, need to make partial templates to stay in Django. Like for instance, if I have a common look and feel to buttons, if I wanted to change that right now, I'd have to change a bunch of buttons because I've kind of just copied them around and said, forget it, it's fine. I don't know that I will want to change a lot of buttons for a long time, but that will definitely be a downside. Like I haven't made that be super reusable. And that's not a knock against Tailwind. that's a knock against me and the decisions I made for doing how I did my CSS on this project so far. Okay, so let's make those actual changes. So we're going to change that to sign up. Okay, yes, SCSS to adjust colors and theme. Yeah, and Tailwind can do that too. I'm using Tailwind from a CDN right now to keep my CSS build process super light. But if I ever came to the point where I wanted to use not the default color palette that's available to me, then I'd have to go that route and start to configure Post CSS, I think is the tool they use. And I've done it in the past. I actually do it for my personal website. But I again, trying to get to not spending too much time on the basic setup for this site I took an expedient route. Okay, so let's see what else we need to do. We've got I changed the actual label on the top, and there is a label here that I need to change up to be sign up as well, be consistent. And what else are we going to need? Let's go back and look at the view source. And the name of the field was email, and the name of the password field is password1. So we just need to check those and make sure it matches up. I think the email is probably matching, and I suspect that oh, it's not. It's login. Huh. Curious. So we'll say email, and we'll change the ID as well. And the ID is only there because there's some for attribute on this label above it, and that's for accessibility. And to be blunt, I don't know a ton about accessibility. I know that you should make your sites accessible, but I'm not an accessibility expert by any means. But I do know that if you have inputs, you should add labels to them to make screen readers work better. And in order to connect labels, you have to use to the proper input, you have to use a for attribute, and then you have to match to ID. So ID is for the accessibility stuff, and name is for the actual form submission. That always throws me. I don't know if any of you will get tripped up on that too, but I always want ID to be the thing that forms actually submit. And I can't tell you the number of times where I've gotten caught just using ID and being puzzled as to why my form is not actually submitting any values. Kind of embarrassing, actually. So I'm changing some of the inputs here to change from using email to name, and I'm kind of just guessing at this point that this is what the form actually uses. And I think that's a pretty good guess considering we've got the source specified over here. And we also need to change password stuff. Since the ID doesn't really matter for the form submission, I'm going to leave ID password alone, and I'm going to leave the type alone and just change the name to be password1. I think that might be it. And we don't need the forgot password link on this, so we can forego that. Just remove it. And because we removed it, I'm looking. Oh, okay. So I used justify between. It's a flexbox option, which is why if you're looking at the login view, these things are spaced appropriately. And so hopefully with a single button, it'll still be correct. And I also forgot to change, what else did I forget to change? Oops. There's one more thing. I forgot to take the title, which you can't see because my banner at the top clips it off. But the title that shows up in the tab is login, and I need to change that to sign up as well. So you can just take my word for it that will change when I make that change. So we're on the sign up page, and I'm going to refresh, and now we've got the simple sign up, we've got email, we've got password. I think it's time to delete the junk below because I don't think it's serving the value anymore. So we can delete that stuff. And I could test this, but I'm kind of conflicted. I'm conflicted because Django, I would be basically testing Django all-auth functionality. Does their sign-up form work? It's true that there is some actual stuff to test here that if I had named this a pattern or password 7, then it would fail for expected reasons. I think what I'm going to do is just give myself the confidence that this is working locally, and then just trust that Django all-auth is doing the right thing. So I'm not going to write an integration test that will test the template and like do a big test that way. I think it's not going to be worth the effort. So if we refresh again, now we've got this very clean, simple sign-up page. And let's check some validation. So let's see. I'm going to put in some junk, try and sign up. Okay, good. So I've got some client-side validation that is checking for an email address. And because this is an email field, I'm also going to trust that Django all-auth is doing validation, email validation as well on the other side. Maybe some people might be less trusting than me in that regard, and that's fine. If you want to write a test, go for it. But I don't want to spend too much time on it. So we're going to do test at test.com, and I'm going to give it a password. Ooh. Good question, Osetta. Someday I will need to do JavaScript on here. That will be a sad day. I'm not crazy about. Okay, don't get me wrong. JavaScript is fine. I'm joking more than anything. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with it. But I will try and avoid using JavaScript for as long as possible, because I think I can go a really far way with server-side rendered pages. And when it finally comes time to do JavaScript, I honestly don't know what tool I want to use. I'm really taken with. Are y'all familiar with DHH, David Hennemeyer Hansen? He's the guy who's behind Ruby on Rails. He wrote the Ruby on Rails framework. So, well, he's one of many, a chorus now, but he is the original creator of Ruby on Rails. And he's a very opinionated individual. He's fiery. He's an interesting fellow. And he talks about how server-side rendering, in his point of view, can get you a really long way. And you don't have to go really heavy on JavaScript if you don't want to. And given the amount of experience that I've had with it, and given that I'm a small one-person project, I very much agree with him. What I have found in my experience when I was doing a one-person project, my last project I actually started, and it started as an Ember.js app with a Django REST framework backend. And I was doing a ton of duplicate work between them. I was making models in my backend, and then I'd have to make like equivalent models in Ember on the Ember data side to get them all to connect to each other. So I decided that like the true full single page app is just it's not for me. And it took me a long time on that particular app. And when I made the call to switch over to doing Django templates, I basically re-implemented the whole app, that last project, in Django templates. And what had taken me about a year to do with the double client stuff, I think I cranked out in a couple of weeks. Now, some of that was a lot of that probably was my familiarity with already knowing Django, but I can believe that some of it could be attributed to the fact that doing the double work was really burdensome on my flow. Okay, so and we've unmasked a problem with my notification system. As you can see, there are intercooler.js. What is intercooler? Oops, that was not a link. Intercooler. Let's take a break. Ajax with attributes. Okay. Interesting. So I've been looking. Yeah, let's talk about JS for a minute. So I'm not ready to bite off the JS beast yet, but I've been looking at a couple of tools. One of them is, and of course I'm drawing a blank on it. Shoot. Let's see if this search works. Basecamp JavaScript. Stimulus. There it is. So sticking with David Heinemeier Hansson and what he was talking about is he's got a framework that they use at Basecamp, and Basecamp is his company. It's the company that prompted the creation of Ruby on Rails, and is still his product that he works on. And like his company has a bunch of different products, but Basecamp is sort of their flagship product. And so they do a lot of server-side rendering and then do progressive enhancement with JavaScript. And so they render a bunch of their HTML with certain data attributes that follows a conventional pattern to do some JavaScript stuff. And I guess there's an example here. Yeah, and see it in action there. So that's not a lot of work, and it kind of answers the mail on doing some JavaScript. But I don't know. I have not explored this enough to know if this is an interesting choice or the choice that I want. And part of that is, while I respect David and what he's done, I don't know that I actually like Rails. Rails has, and Ruby, I guess in general, has quite a bit of indirection that happens in it, and a lot of implicit interaction. Some people love that. Like, they like the fact that there's very minimal code in Rails controllers, which are the kind of the equivalent of Django views, as I understand. You don't have to necessarily do imports in Ruby files. They're just sort of there and present. And to the zen of Python and being explicit over implicit, that sort of bothers me about Rails. So if that's the way that this stimulus framework sort of plays out, of just implicit things happen, then I don't know if this is going to be the right one for me. There was another one, and what's the other one called? So if y'all don't listen to, well, I don't know if you listen to podcasts or not. I do. And one of the podcasts that I like a lot, have a lot of respect for, is the Changelog. And it is by these two gentlemen, Adam Stacoviak and Jared Santo. And it's a lot of really good conversations come out of here. And recently, that's this particular episode, the dawn of sponsorware. Jared interviewed this person named Caleb, and I guess Caleb does PHP stuff generally. And one of the projects that he talks about is Livewire, which is like Live View. If you've done any Elixir stuff, Live View is super cool. Well, we can talk about that in a second. But sticking to JavaScript, he talked about Alpine.js. And Osaida, it might be similar to Intercooler.js. I don't know. But it sounds like very minimal. You add a script tag, you add some data attributes to your markup, and then with a tiny amount of JavaScript, it does stuff. Again, I don't really know if this is the right tool that I want to use. So that's part of my problem with JavaScript, is that there are so many choices and so many frameworks, and you have to filter the noise, like what's fashion versus what's actually going to stand the test of time. And that's what gives me pause. So maybe I'll be curmudgeon-y and go pick Backbone or something like that. Something that is at this point old and stable and may not be the coolest kid on the block, but might do the job. Anyway, Alpine.js, that's a cool one. But the other thing that he talked about, and I've not actually looked at this project, but this is called Livewire, and it's inspired by Elixir. Yeah, I said Backbone. I sort of say it seriously because I've used Backbone at a previous job, and if you don't have complicated JavaScript needs, Backbone's pretty nice. Like, it's very simple. Where Backbone starts to fall apart is when you start to try and make Backbone do more. Try and make it move towards a full single page application and start composing Backbone chunks together. Then it gets messy, and Backbone doesn't have like the right flow control. So what React and Vue and friends solved, in my opinion, is oh, okay, intercool, interesting. But what React and Vue solve is my understanding is that they allowed for a component pattern where you can have a parent component and it can have children and they can compose together. And that was, in my experience, that was the actual weakness with Backbone, is I could make a Backbone view and make what you would consider a component in Backbone. But the moment you needed to have multiple Backbone views start to work together and have components, Backbone's event system started to fall over. It just wasn't robust enough to handle that. And people tried to tackle that with a project, I think one's called Marionette is the most popular one, which sort of adds a layer on top of Backbone to give it extra structure and control, as the name Marionette implies. But yeah, I never got that far, and I don't think I'd pursue that. Is Django with Vanilla.js front end viable? Do you mean like a baggy t-shirt? Do you mean like React or like Vue or any of those? If so, totally. It's an Angular. I work at Doctor on Demand. We have apps that use AngularJS and Vue.js, and we've made apps that have REST APIs that talk to those things, and it works totally well for that. Oh, no framework at all. You mean like a GitHub style, just like manipulating the DOM? I think there'd be no problem with that. And yeah, so I agree with you. Like Vue, I've used Vue. It looks pretty cool, but it is probably more than I would need. So what was I saying? Oh, I remember. We were going to get into Elixir for just a second, because Elixir has this super cool thing that is also no JavaScript. And Elixir Phoenix Live View is the thing. Maybe there might even be a demo of this that we could check out. So yeah, this is just a documentation page. Live View is, how do I describe this? Y'all know Turbo Links? Does that ring a bell for anybody? It's or PJAX, or there are a bunch of other concepts like there that if you have a static website and you don't want to do a full page refresh, then you can use some of these technologies called Turbo Links and PJAX, and I think this is what GitHub might still do today. And so when you click on links, what these systems do is they take over the default browser behavior and turn your link click into an AJAX request. And the AJAX request, its job, instead of returning like JSON data, is to return an HTML fragment, and it will insert that into the DOM. So you never get to experience the whole page refresh. But the downside, and the reason why a lot of people, TurboLinks has sort of a bad reputation in a lot of circles, which is probably not fair. It's a fine technology if used appropriately. But the downside of TurboLinks, in my understanding, is that stuff can go stale in weird ways. And I've experienced this to a degree with some GitHub pages. Like there's certain times where it's like, oh, okay, GitHub, I'm just going to refresh the page and you figure it out. This happens commonly when like merging pull requests and stuff that I've left open after a couple days on the tab, like it just doesn't clear out quite right. So there are edge cases that can happen with these things. But what Phoenix Live View does that's so interesting is it's kind of like TurboLinks, except that it couples it with a WebSocket connection. And so anytime you're doing link clicking, Phoenix is actually translating that stuff, and it's doing AJAX requests just like TurboLinks, but it does it sort of transparently. So what you end up writing is, I think you write the server-side templates, and you have like click handlers and stuff that you just do all in your server-side templates. And then when it actually comes time to deploy your app, Phoenix is taking care of all that stuff for you. So that's really fascinating and interesting. I don't know of anything like that for Django. That would be, I might even explore if this kind of concept exists in Django. I don't know if Channels has any kind of functionality like this, but so that's the big discussion around JavaScript. In other words, at this stage, I don't know what I'm doing with it, but those are the jumble of thoughts that I have about it. Dang it, I just closed my, I gotta make sure I keep my focus on the right thing because I just closed my chat. Shoot. All right. Let me go open that up. Sorry, y'all. So my setup is sort of janky in some ways, because what I do, I use OBS Studio, or Open Broadcaster software, which I guess is very normal. But I've had a bunch of experience where it, if I try to embed an HTML thing in there, like a chat box, it will actually crash OBS. So I've taken to just doing the pop-out window in my browser, which you just saw me do there quickly, and then hide it off in the sidebar. And that works, but it only works if I keep my focus on my actual browser. So I tried to close a tab and I closed my chat by accident. Oops. Okay, let's get back to what we were doing. We had talked about a bunch of frameworks, and we're now at, we just did a sign up somewhere on one of these. Where did it go? Did I lose it? It's on this private window, that's right. So the thing that we discovered is if there's more than one notification, it blows up, because these things are trying to stack on top of each other. That's not cool. That's not really what I want. So there's probably a quick way we can fix that. Let's take a look. So what those are is the Django Messages app, and the Messages app works by, I think it does cookies. I don't recall actually, or session state. Somehow it manages what messages you want to send. And so when you're using the Messages app, you can say, from Django.contrib import messages, I believe is the thing you have to do. And then you can say messages.addMessage and give it whatever message you want to do. And the messages system will, as I said, stuff that into session or cookie somewhere. And when the view goes to render it, then it will, if there are any messages to display, it will display them. And I believe I put that, I guess it's in the nav. Yeah. So it'll show up as message context, and then you can loop through them, kind of consume those messages. And as you can see here, I've got this, so it's just doing a list. And so it's listing them just in a list, and I don't know how else to say that. It's an unordered list. And I think if I need to do multiple messages, which will be exceedingly rare, sign up will be one place. What choices do I have? I could make this so that the flex box is what? So this is just a stack right now. And I could change this so that instead of being block scope and going one underneath the other, I could go horizontally. That would still look pretty crappy, probably, because you'd have like two messages side by side, and it might look super weird, but it will look better than this garbage. Problem is that this is going to be annoying to test because these messages have already been consumed. What we're going to do is we're going to basically copy this stuff, and we're going to simulate this for now and poke around on the UI until it looks right, and then we can put back the structure. So I'm going to highlight these lines and comment them out, and I'm going to take a UL and a closing UL, and that's unordered list if you're not super familiar with HTML. And we're going to get a list item here and change the inner content of the tag to some message to display. Then we're going to do another one, and we'll say some other message to display. So now if we come over here and refresh, you can see the original two messages went away because they were cleared out. But now we have these two decently long messages to work with. Maybe I'll make them a little bit longer. Make it longer. So that's a tiny bit more reflective of what we just saw a minute ago. We'll do that to this one as well. And so now we've got something to work with. And because what I also think will happen is if I put these side by side and the messages are super long, well, then we have another problem of what does it look like? What does it look like if the text is too long? Are they going to clip? What are they going to do? So we need to think about what we need to put here. And I think we can't attach any classes to this flex grow because that's a div that is too high in scope. So instead we need to put it on this UL probably. And I think I want it to, so let's say we want this UI to be flex. And I don't even know if is that going to change it already? And we want it to be flex row. Maybe that's, whoops, not flu row, flex row. What that should do, I think, is change the orientation of every element in here to go from being in the standard block UI, which is what we're seeing, the stack of li tags, and shift them over. I could be totally wrong. I'm totally wrong. All right, what did we do wrong here? Why did the li tags not show up as actual flex row stuff? It's time to inspect these elements to see what's going on. Oh, I have a syntax error somewhere. Yeah, I forgot class. Maybe it is right. All right. Well, it's closer. Still looks terrible. So what can we do about this? We can do, and the reason it looks terrible is because I only designed the messages to have enough room for a single line. And there's also some stuff going on here that's like pushing some things out of place. So we've got the li tag itself has the margin in the X, so the margin on both sides, and since there's two of them, that's what we're seeing. That's why we've got these big gigantic chunks here, and I think that's why it's cut off so much space that it can't fit them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the margin actually on the UL instead and remove it from these guys. See how that looks. Okay, so that's better, but clearly we need a little bit of margin if we're going to have two messages in here. So let's leave them, but make them like margin 2. And here's where you can start to see the power of Tailwind. Is all I'm doing is changing CSS classes. I'm not doing any CSS file changes. I'm not having to do any kind of watcher process to like watch for SaaS or less or whatever your tool of choice is and wait for it to recompile a CSS file. None of that. I'm just adding classes and manipulating stuff, and then I do a page refresh, which I think is pretty fantastic. So that's pretty cool. And these were reasonably long messages, and it is pretty rare that one of these is going to be super long, but still, maybe we should think about the case where something is ridiculously long. So let's have a crazy long message to really muck stuff up. See what happens. And then we get back to that yucky scenario where it just doesn't look good. So we've got some overflow options available to us, and I think that's probably what I'm going to reach for. But I don't know how those are going to work with Flex. So I'm going to say overflow X, I think, and see what that does. Nothing. Okay. Overflow only really takes effect when you have a bounding, the parent is constraining the box. And in this Flex scenario where we're spacing things out, it doesn't really actually have that hard constraint. So what could we do? We could say, we could give it a hard constraint on the width. Let's bring up Tailwind, look up some max sizes. Max width. That's what we're interested in, I think. And so Tailwind's great. Like they've got a good search box where you can just start typing in roughly what you think you need, and it will give you the classes that you're interested in, and it actually does the exact translation to what these things really are. So if we give these things a max width of one of these values, and let's see how it looks. So maybe we don't want one of these to be over a certain size. Let's try setting to, what was it, max width or max W? Max W. And then we'll say small, just for sake of really proving this out if they're on super constrained sizes. Okay, well, it's still pretty wide, so maybe that's too wide for this example. I think there was an extra small. All right, well, my overflow is not overflowing, so perhaps I got that wrong. I did. I just said overflow X, and it's like, what are you talking about? So we need to give it a choice. And I think what I want to do is maybe give it I don't want to hide it completely, because perhaps there is a message that somebody wants to read there. And so let's try scroll. I'm not crazy about scroll overflows, but at least it would give somebody a chance to read the full message if they needed to. And again, these scenarios, they really shouldn't come up unless there are two messages and they both happen to be long. We're sort of touching up the really extreme cases. But apparently I'm still not doing this right. What's going on here? We've got the rules. Okay, it is overflow X on scroll. But the max, and there's the max width, and the max width is working. I wonder if we also have to constrain the height, maybe? Because that might be, what might be happening is so as the box is shrinking, Flex is saying, okay, you still have room to grow down. And because of that, there's no reason to overflow. So let's try a height setting to see if that will actually finally constrain the box to make it so that it fits in there right. So max height. That's not really what I want. Maybe not max height. How about just height? Give it a very specific height. We can control that with an H. All right, let's play with some of those. Let's try, where were they? Right, H8. I don't know. It's not the reason why I like Tailwind. You can just start like experimenting. All right, clearly this might not be worth the effort, because look what this is doing. This is like really bizarre. Well, let's put it on both of them so that we get an apples to apples comparison. Okay. So this is bizarre. It's wrapping this stuff and putting some weird padding on it. That number is definitely too small. But I don't know that I'm going to be satisfied with any of these numbers, to be honest. Yeah, that looks still pretty weird. Overflow, because this is like overflow Y, right? This is the up and down. So it's forced to do something as the box has reached its maximum width, and it is making the choice to wrap it when I thought that it would not do that. So if I come over to the rules, overflow X, if I change these, what will happen? Auto, hidden, inherit, no, definitely not. Well, this doesn't seem right. I'm starting to like, it's starting to not be worth it. I thought I could get this quickly and be successful with it, but we're really dealing with a very much a kind of a corner case of this process. So let's inspect the whole. So look at that. That UL has a lot of room, and a lot of that room is not being used for some reason. Oh, it's not being used because I only I set the max width to be a certain size, and that's kind of just silly. So what if I take that out but give it a height? What will that do? All right, so that's a lot more reasonable, and maybe that's good enough. Because how often will this really happen? Because I'm gonna bump this down to 10 because it's feeling a little tight to me. That looks like a better size, and the message seems to fit in there better for the single line. Although there's this multiple thing. But as I've said, this is just so long. So let's delete that and see how it looks when we get back to some normal sizes. Okay, so there's no scroll bar when it's at a normal size. And the margin on this UL is still too big. So because I put a margin X of 2 on the individual things, I don't need a margin X of 8 because that's because there's 4 total for each of these LI things. So I think we can get away with changing this to be a 4. Cut that in half. That should add some additional room to breathe. Okay, so I think that's a reasonable set of attributes to have. We've now constrained it. We've given it what to do in the crazy case. And I think what we can do is then take this stuff and insert it back in the template. And we'll do one more test of a new sign up and try it out and see, because that was the case that actually had 2 different messages, and see if it's good enough. And that will probably cover like 99% of the time. So let's uncomment this and take this UL here and replace that. And we want to take this list item here and change the content from being the static stuff back to message, like that. So we just added a couple classes to it in the end. And get rid of that, and get rid of that. So our static content, our placeholder stuff is not there anymore. And now we should be able to go do the checking out of what this looks like on a... Ooh, that's interesting. Is that what I want? Because now it's like this little pill thing. I don't know if maybe I want this centered. Expect. Try items center. Item center? Yeah, that's not the one I want. Justify center. Okay. So that puts that message right in the middle. Feels pretty good. And that justify is a flex option. I'm going to put it next to the flex stuff that's there. Okay, so we've now got the notifications, the messages are updated in their styling. The sign up has some updated styling. And we'll create another test account here. Just say t1@testing.com because it doesn't really matter. And all right, cool. Look at that. That's pretty good. We've got some padding that keeps it away from those. And this might be the one time that anybody actually sees 2 messages, because any other time in this app, I will probably make sure to only ever send a single message. But when there are views that I don't control, which is exactly what Django All-Auth is doing, we've got that going. So where does that put us? We've done some good stuff tonight, I think. We've got, what do we have to look at? So we really only ended up touching 2 files. We fixed the signup page to use a consistent style that looks consistent with login. And we talked through about adding the confirm or the show, that kind of stuff. And that led to a little side discussion about JavaScript, which I enjoyed. Thanks. And then we made little tweaks so that the messages are actually appearing. But I think that might be where we need to stop. But before we do that, let's talk about what is likely going to be the next thing worth showing on the stream. I think what I want to do next is what I talked about of the walking through that onboarding flow of what are we going to do when someone is a new user. So you can see right off the bat, we've created this new test account, and in this initial view, this is the main app view that comes with this home button. They're shown a week, and there's links to weeks before and after, but they have no data yet. And if I was a first user of this app, I'd be like, what is this trash? Because it's a really bad experience. There's no guidance on what to do next, and they need to be helped along. So we're gonna have to figure out logically, like, what are the conditions where we show some kind of onboarding flow, and maybe those conditions are actually maybe when you sign up for the first time, rather than dumping you to this app view, maybe there is like a set of pages, like a wizard or something, that is kind of saying, hey, here's your first walkthrough, here's the things you need to know. And that might be helpful rather than trying to cram all of this stuff into the view. But if we took that approach, and I'm still considering it, I haven't made up my mind. If we took that approach, then someone could still bail out of that wizard. I mean, there's a lot of people who don't like reading anything, or they just want to play around. And sometimes I'm that person, so I don't fault them at all. So I have to think about the scenario where somebody is logged in, we've dumped them into a wizard screen, but they still have all the nav buttons. And I can guarantee there's going to be someone who says, like, I don't care about this stuff, just show me my dashboard or my home. And they click that button for the first time. And if we have still not created any data, I still don't want to dump them to this page because that would be super confusing. Also, if I don't give them a way back to do that setup process, then they're going to be left just as confused and not know how to proceed. So there's almost like a checklist that the application requires before I can kind of let them loose on their own content. And it involves a certain set of the models to work through. So let's take a quick look at the models so that we can have an idea of what we'll do next time. Maybe I'll write down a couple issues in GitHub so that we can have a frame of reference for the next conversation, and then we'll call it a night. So if we go over to the schools app, that's where I want to start. So the way that I've modeled the system so far is when you sign up, I take 2 actions. You get, and let's bring up a second app as well, so we have a side-by-side. When you sign up, you get a user record created for you. I have a custom user, which is based off of Django's abstract user class, which I've talked about and documented on a previous stream if you're interested. And it takes all the standard attributes, so that's where your username and your email and all of those things are stored, and you get a row in there. And I also took an action, and you can see it here with this signal handler that says when a new user is created. You can see that here. The sender is the user model, and the particular signal to be listening for is post save. And when you look at the documentation for how post save signals work, one of the attributes on that is this Boolean of created. So this only ever runs this code. I mean, it'll run every time save is happening, but it only ever triggers this line right here on that first sign up. So these accounts, if I was to go into the admin, you would see that I'm automatically creating a school. Because I knew that that was just going to be so critical to all of the authorization checking that I need to do for user accounts that I didn't want to have to bother to tell a user to make a school. They just get their own school when they join. That's what this code is doing. But beyond that, that's where I need to start to get their input. I need to have them create a school year. That is like the kind of the core model to track users or students year over year. Like I presume most of you went to grade school, secondary school. I don't know what countries you're in, but if you're in the United States, you go through grade school and then you go through secondary school, like your higher grade levels, and you go through multiple years of this, right? This shouldn't be new to anybody who's done school, which is just about everybody. Everybody who might be watching the stream anyway. And so you have a school year that represents your academic year. So as an administrator, because that's what I'm treating these users as, their job is to say, what is the bounds of their school year? And since this application is all about doing homeschool, that school year can vary. I can't just assume what their school year is going to be. For instance, in my home, we're actually running on a calendar year. We're not starting our kids on the same timeline that a lot of most U.S. schools do, of starting in the fall and having a summer break. We're doing calendar year and school year round, so that we have more opportunities to take longer vacations throughout the year and kind of just spread it out. So the school year needs to be like step one of what somebody creates, because that's going to dictate what grade levels they need to support for their students. So we need to have them on board and say, like, you need to start by creating your school year, and then from there, it sort of all forms a big tree. The school year is the root of that tree, and underneath that are the grade levels that are going to apply. So my kids are in second grade and kindergarten this year. Next school year, they'll be third grade and first grade and so on. And the reason I want to make grade levels associate with every school year rather than just being sort of a static thing that exists outside of the school year is because grades might change and evolve. You might have, not different teachers necessarily, since it's homeschooled, but the kind of course that my son is going to experience will be a little different than what my daughter will experience when she gets to second grade, because of her skills versus his skills will be different, and so her needs versus his needs will be different. So I don't want to model all grade levels as exactly the same. So we kind of have to step down from school year to grade level, and then there's a bunch of pieces after that. And so that's the approach I want to take, is to walk somebody through and introduce them to the product and say, here is what you need to do to get started for the year. You need to define what your year is. Then you need to make your grades for your students. And then we'll discuss more pieces after that. There are others, but I don't want to bore you with the entire domain model. So I think that's going to be the next step. And let's go to GitHub for a minute. And actually not in the private browsing window. We don't need that anymore. Let's go over here where I have this. And we'll put in just one issue for now of start the onboarding flow. And we need to create a school year and create a grade level. And the idea is, like, a lot of families have, especially homeschool families that I've met, have multiple kids. And their kids will be in different grade levels, but the point of the onboarding is not to like flesh out every grade level or every student, but to give them one thread all the way through that says, here's what you need to do, here's the places you need to go to start clicking around and creating this stuff, and getting enough of a scaffolding in place so that when they need to add on new courses, new grade levels, new students, that they are equipped to do that. And that's the path that we need to walk down. So I think having these two things set in place for now will be a good enough indicator for what to do next. And that's where we'll go from there. So thank you all for joining in. It was a good discussion. I post this stuff to YouTube, so you can check out stuff later on if you found things interesting or need to reference back to some stuff. There's a lot of good chat about JavaScript. If you want to keep up with me, again, my website is mattlehman.com. I have a mailing list there where I will email out about materials that I post. I'm doing a lot of Django articles this year. If you're wanting to learn more Django, you can continue to watch here on the stream and on YouTube, or if reading is also something you enjoy doing and want to do that, you're welcome to join me there as well. With that, I think that's about all I have to say. So thanks so much for joining in, and have a good night.